Now, in some years back, there was a legend who used to play for Gor Mahia and Harambee Stars. He was a defender. His name was Juakali. Tobias Ochola, Juakali. Tobias Ochola, Juakali. Now, our guest today is not Tobias, he's Tobias. Tobias Alando, Juakali. He is the acting CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. See the Juakali comes in.
Well done.
Tobias, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the situation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You knew about Juakali?
Yes. Yes.
That guy was serious.
Very.
Tobias Ochola, Juakali.
I used to watch him play football. My dad loved football, so we took us to watch football.
Yeah. Live.
Live.
Aye.
And I also played football, so I still play football.
See? It's in the name. What's in the name? Football.
Yeah.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
We are going to talk about the manufacturing sector in Kenya and how we are doing in terms of just driving industry. And of course, Kenya Association of Manufacturers have been in the forefront of, just doing that work, advocacy.
Yes.
Working and bringing your members.
Correct.
And pushing an agenda.
Correct.
But City will welcome you with the day's proverb first. This week, we are in the continent of Africa, north of the Limpopo, south of the Sahara.
Yes. Our proverbs for the following weeks or this month will come from Africa south of the Sahara, and as Eric has very eloquently put it, north of the Limpopo. We're in the DRC.
Yeah.
Okay? Whose capital is Kinshasa. This one always trips me out.
Kin what? Sorry, I was just making sure that you...
Shasa. What thought I was going to Sasha it. Nah, sorry. The rain does not fear the authority of a king.
The rain does not fear the authority of a king. Tobias, what's the interpretation of this one?
It can rain on you irrespective of your status. Yes.
What's the inner meaning? The deeper meaning?
Just typically, your status does not protect you from nature. Yes.
Wewe ni mtu mdogo sana when it comes to nature. Mtu mdogo sana wewe. Tanipa nini? Wilbaro. Okay. Karibu sana, Tobias.
Yeah,
so, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we've had these conversations many times.
Yeah.
It's a business membership organization, right?
Yeah.
And you have very many members.
Correct.
All of them focused on industry.
Correct.
We have a ministry that is in charge of industry, and actually even a state department that's in charge of industry.
Correct.
That means that there's a focus on making sure that our industrialization works.
Yes.
Our Vision 2030 says we get to 2030 in the next 5 years as a middle-income industrialized... Are we?
It's a journey that has been very unstable in terms of the manufacturing sector. In fact, the last time our contribution to the GDP was two-digit was in 2011. Where we had 11% contribution to the GDP. Since 2011 to now 2014, that has gone down. We are now at
2024 now.
2024, sorry. We are now at 7.6. So it already shows you that the manufacturing sector contribution to the GDP has gone down tremendously. And our competitiveness in terms of Tanzania, Uganda, and the EAC, those countries are further developed. They are much more developed in terms of the manufacturing sector, unlike before, where we were a dominant country in terms of the manufacturing space. And that's 2 years ago when we did have a conversation with the leadership of this country. There was an ambition to say, let's drive the contribution of the GDP by the manufacturing sector to another 20% by 2030. 2030. There are a couple of things that needed to be done or needs to be done in terms of predictability of the tax environment, in terms of the costs of energy, because that at large is one of the things that contribute to the uncompetitiveness. If you look at, for example, in the EAC region, the cost of power, we are 70% more expensive.
What?
Compared to our counterpart in the region. And even
Which
in the African.
Like on average?
If you compare an average Uganda, Tanzania, even if you go further to South Africa, the cost of energy in Uganda, Tanzania is about 5-8 cents per kilowatt or US dollar per kilowatt hour. We are at 20 cents. So that already shows you that we cannot compete. Although the differentiator is that we are slightly more reliable compared to the others. So what the industries are doing is you make use or make do of the opportunity that at least I have the power at a slightly expensive, but it is reliable.
But it's there.
It's there.
Okay.
That's the only advantage that we have.
It isn't slightly more. It is significantly more.
It is more.
But how do we manage to maintain this significantly more expensive power? What is it that we do? Because surely, if you want to industrialize, one of the elements of industrialization that you must control and you must ensure is reasonable power.
That's true. So what happens if you look at the source of power, where we get our power, is either through hydro and thermal. Currently, it's about 30% thermal and about 50% hydro. So the thermal is expensive.
And thermal here includes geothermal?
No, it doesn't include geothermal.
Here,
is more
thermal you just mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Means generators.
Okay.
It is powered and you're using fuel to generate energy. So thermal is expensive, and that's one of the contributors. But at large, you cannot continue without thermal. You need thermal. But we need to reduce, and our proposal has been reduce the thermal generation by another 10% and increase the hydro generation by another 60% from 50%. With that, you'll see a slight reduction and also address issues around wastage, transmission losses. Our transmission loss is at around 28%. The best standard should be at 13%. So you reduce the transmission loss, because these transmission losses, these costs are transferred back to
brought to the
all of us.
industry, but brought to the consumer.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask a precursor question before we get into maybe a little bit more nitty-gritty. Because sometimes we look at the potential of somebody to do something. I remember, like in grade school, they say, okay, well, I've seen you over a certain period of time, and your potential to be a B student is here. Your potential to be an A student is here. Does Kenya have the potential to punch above this? What was it? You said 6%?
7.6.
7.6%.
Yes.
Does Kenya have the potential to be at the 20-25% that 20 years ago its counterparts today, the country that everybody wants to give an example, Singapore? So does Kenya have the potential today, from where you sit, to be at that 25%?
Definitely. It has been demonstrated in 2011. Like I mentioned, our contribution was at 11%. So that already shows you from 7.6 we can go above 11%.
Okay.
We have to be intentional as a country and ensure that the investment space is really conducive to attract more investment and also to grow the existing investment. We have the right skill set in terms of the human capital in this country. We have the right environment in this country. We have enough land. We just need to take that hard decision and say we want to grow the industrialization in this country. How do we create a conducive policy environment?
Okay, so then I guess, how do we do that?
How do we do that?
If we know that the ground essentially is ripe, and
Yes.
they said that all these, you talk about the environment, all of these things are there. So what stops this from happening?
So one of the clear conversations we've had is the issue of unpredictable policy environment. Every government department wanting to make decision, wanting to make regulations that touches on the industries, wanting to introduce levies and taxes that touches on the industries, and wanting to have a pie of what we do. So it is uncoordinated. And that's conversation we've had with the Ministry of Industry right now through the business reform legislation that is coming up, is have a coordinated mandate as a ministry where you have an ear of what needs to be, what is being done by others. Because if you put to paper all the taxes that come from different agencies, you will not invest in this country. You will not.
It's just too much.
Too much.
What contributed to the drop from 11.5 to 7.6?
For industry to thrive, one of the issues is generally the political environment. During the instability of our country in terms of politics, you tend to find a lot of investment not expanding or not coming in. So the political stability affects our economy in one or the other.
Okay.
The other thing is about legislations and introduction of fees. I think we have the drive to raise revenue everywhere, and that has contributed a lot. You see, many counties came in, and a lot of counties, this county want to charge businesses, and this really impedes the growth of businesses in this country, and so we are left in an environment where you are not even sure what new fee will come up.
Okay.
You take an example of someone who has about 20 or 50 trucks moving from one county to another, delivering
bread,
yes, bread, for example. And each county wants you to pay about 30 cess. They call it cess, they call it movement, whatever, or distribution tax.
And then you've advertised on the truck.
Now they don't advertise. In fact, they paint them white.
Paint.
Yes,
because you put bread on your truck.
So you look at those costs and you're like, no, it doesn't make sense.
But Tobias,
yes.
Between 2011 and 2024, we cannot talk about political instability that would drive industry out of this country. So, right, we can say that really did not contribute, or did it?
It did in a way.
What political instability?
Let me tell you. You see, investment does not mean today is a political instability. It's a journey, because investment plan take years. So if there was instability 2-3 years back, your investment plan is derailed, definitely.
Okay.
So it's a journey that affects the future plans for any investor.
This is then very instrumental.
Yes.
Because in 2008, that's when we had actual proper political instability, right? And then we emerged out of it.
Correct.
In 2010, we promulgated a new constitution, ushering new hope for this country.
Yes.
So by 2011, when the economy was doing 11.5%, it was showing a recovery from that few big dip of 2007. Then we had a new constitution, devolution, new institutions in place, new all this and the other. Why would industry be jittery when constitution and everything else speaks hope? What is it that would make industry feel, I'm not sure about this, to a point where we're actually seeing a reduction in investment?
So if you continue, if you look at that journey, 2007, 2008, 2010 new constitution, everything is stable, government is working. 2013, look at 2013, what happened? There was election, of course. There was instability. People are not so sure what is going to happen. And that instability inhibits investment generally. So from there on, we've seen a lot of 2017 again. You see a lot of delayed investment. Someone say, I'm not going to expand until I'm sure. Meanwhile, what is happening in our in our other
neighboring
country. There is stability. What would someone say? He wants to make money, so move.
So that also contributed. The alternative that then existed, because our neighbors seem to have a stabler, cheaper
transition of power.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, the other one was the tax issues.
Yes.
Right? Obviously, those ones are big issues. There's the whole conversation about new county governments have come in and they're imposing taxes, and then there's the national level and the tax imposition, which is where CAM comes in. As, this body that advocates for these issues, you must have been having daily conversations with both national and county governments as all these things were happening.
Yes.
Are you saying that you're actually not getting to get a listening ear such that industry would still see, no, I am going? Because I'm looking 11.5 to 7.6, it's a huge drop.
Yes. So we do, and every year we do make recommendations, and these recommendations are based on well thought of research. The impact of any policy change, the impact of any increment of duty, the proposal of reduction of duty, and how that will impact investment in terms of the manufacturing sector. So in certain instances, our feedback was not taken. And through that, we just play what we say, wait and see what will happen, definitely. We've done our research. We know this will impact the growth of industries. And this is our proposal, either increase to protect the local industries or reduce duties, specific duties, to also enhance the growth of the industries. And also the citizens also lacking of understanding. For example, in the last finance bill, there was a conversation about protecting local manufacturers through imposing duty on imported sanitary pads. For that matter. And the citizens were like, you know what, this will not make the sanitary pads affordable. But from where we sit, if you protect the local manufacturing, you're growing the production locally, and you're also creating jobs. So it's a conversation that needs to be done by both citizen and understanding by both citizen and the political side. Otherwise, we make it an issue that we are now making some items expensive.
But is it really possible for the government, through its policies and through other endeavors, to actually ensure that manufacturing is actually enhanced, so that instead of this story of, one, it is too costly, B, people are moving out, that doesn't happen, and that people actually stay? Is it possible for the government to do so? And if it is, what does the government need to do really?
It is very possible, and this one requires political will and goodwill from both government and even the citizens of Kenya. Other countries have done it. They took that hard stand and say, we are going to promote our SMEs, we are going to promote our local manufacturing. And they have grown. China has grown because of that intent. So it is indeed possible for our government to do that. And that is why you said we've had a conversation in the last 1 month with the Ministry of Trade and Investment to look at the business reform bill, which basically looks at what are the regulatory challenges that we have been facing and try to address these challenges going forward.
So we're still talking about manufacturing.
I mean, I want to look at some of these matters that we seem to have been having a conversation around for way too long. And in as much as, Kenya is our focal point, I think that a lot of the nations around the continent are dealt with this particular, and I'm going to be as bold as call it an illness, because it is an illness when you can't just wake up to decide to do something that you see will save you, essentially. So, but are these solutions formulaic in nature? That if you do 1 + 1, you are guaranteed to get 2? Where we know that taxes will generate some kind of income, I think that it is a lazy way of guarantee. That innovation requires that you do certain things in order for you to turn over. And in order for you to turn over, you must sell and make a profit. In order for you to sell and make a profit, you must then you must create. There's no nation on this world who's turning a profit, who's doing export, that has not innovated. Look around. of course, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir because you know exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So is this a formulaic thing whereby you input this number, you mix it up here, you will get this at the end of the day? Is it? Does it work like that? Or is it more subjective?
It's more subjective, I would say so, because in the manufacturing sector, the bit of production is input-output, but there's what is after that. How do I access my market?
Okay.
How do I sell my products competitively? Looking at the cost of production and everything, how do I now move these goods to the intended people? So where we are at the moment is we are looking at identifying export markets, new export markets, and already there are trade agreements that have been signed in. One is a EU EPA, giving us an access to the EU market. EU, about a population of 300 million people. Giving us access to this market is a huge opportunity.
Can I stop you there?
Yes.
How long ago was this initiative put into play?
This about last year.
Exactly.
Last year. In fact, right now we are doing sensitization on the export readiness to all our manufacturers.
Okay.
And the EU market is not all about horticulture. That is what has been done.
Yes.
But there is more that we can export to the EU.
Like what?
Looking at finished manufactured goods.
Range of quarter-free access.
Quarter-free, duty-free access.
Duty-free access.
Yes.
For anything.
For anything.
We can make our slaughter our cows, get the hide, make our shoes and belts and bags
and sell to the EU.
I'm sorry, I just have to. So we know how stringent EU markets are.
Definitely.
We know that you can't we've seen it from the horticulture, for example. I went to a factory where I saw people measure a French bean, that it has to be so many inches, it has to be this color. The requirements are breakneck, straight. So for them to say, okay, Kenya, we're giving you access, we're allowing you to do 1, 2, 3, come in. One would imagine then that Kenya would say, oh, this is fantastic. Can we identify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 products that we say we can sell, because you already know what they can let you bring in. It's there. What would the difficulty then present in identifying that product and then get going and say, all right, guys, there's the market. We've been allowed access. This is what we can make. We have the raw material. We have the expertise. What would be the challenge then in saying, okay, in the next 12 months or 24 months, we should make sure that this product then is available? Because some of those challenges that you speak of then do not exist. You don't have to fight for the door. The door is wide open.
Correct.
You don't have to fight for standards. You've already been told what the standards are.
Correct.
You just have to make and deliver.
Yes.
So why would that still be more difficult?
It's. I wouldn't say it's difficult. It's that we did not have that opportunity to export quarter-free, duty-free. Now we have it. And we have done it in terms of exporting fresh produce to the EU, meaning we have already complied with the standard. We've understood about the logistics. We've understood about the regulatory requirement. The next step is now to identify which other products can we export to the EU.
Okay.
And encourage every person in this country to have that capability to invest in specific products and export to the EU. This is a huge market for us.
Who's taking lead in this?
We are taking lead
as
BMOs.
Okay.
CAM is just one of the lead BMOs. Chamber is also involved. We are working with EU ambassadors to facilitate this conversation amongst our members and amongst the people of Kenya. We've done a couple of sessions.
You deal with people who are in business.
Yes.
They see opportunity where opportunity does not exist for the rest of us, right?
Correct.
They can see it, smell it from far kitambo. So as soon as the conversations about EU economic partnership agreement started, the people who saw the opportunities.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
It's been how many years of the AGOA?
Almost many years, yeah.
It's coming to an end.
Yes.
The people who see opportunity have not gone beyond exporting textile from Kenya.
True.
And yet AGOA has so many options.
Yes.
Again, duty-free?
Quota free. But let me...
We haven't taken advantage of AGOA.
We have our lessons that we learned through AGOA.
Okay.
AGOA, we never did even sensitization the way we are doing right now. We never even had technical experts from US, for that matter, to have that conversations with our exporters. EU, based on the learnings from AGOA, we're saying now we need to have our technical experts from that end to come and tell us what are the requirements. And we do a linkage with importers from that end with our suppliers from this end. So we've had our lessons. And I don't think we can repeat the same mistakes of AGOA of only relying on textile to export to the US.
Actually, we can. As Kenya, we actually can, because if you consider the nations that we keep speaking of, the Asian tigers, whom we like comparing ourselves with, if you look at the path they took to industrialization, we had started before them. In 1954, the colonial government set up what they called ICDC. Okay? It was supposed to do exactly what we're discussing here. And it did. And we saw the investments. And they were there. But somehow we seem to have this capacity for always engaging reverse gear. We moved. And the ICDC investments were in every sector. Whether they're talking Japan, whether they're talking Korea, they're talking China, their governments are involved in business enterprises. Governments are actually partners in some of those huge business enterprises.
Correct.
Now, we had a framework for it. What did we do? We are struggling and coming up with new ideas. We actually got it. We had it right. We actually had it right. But somehow, we fumbled it. We fumbled it. We did whatever it is that we do well. And now we're trying to recreate something that we actually had.
To the letter.
Yes.
And that's what I think, and that's why I asked the question about, is it formulaic? Because if it was, then I don't think we would be where we are today. It's not. Because if it was a crunching numbers kind of thing, we would say, okay, well, here, you put in this number, you get this. It must be more than that. But then at the same time, I think once we've introduced this, the human thinking that doesn't allow us for some reason to not want to be in a situation where we are growing negatively. Whereby there have been countries on this planet, and we're not going to even use it. I mean, look at countries like Ireland, for example, who went through a biting famine, but then decided that on the back of that, and it was a decision that we will never be hungry again. They grew their food and stored it. They sold the surplus and then became, again, one of the most wealthy nations in Europe because of the decision. So are we lacking that lurching capacity to say, okay, guys, let us just do it? AGOA is a brilliant example. We had the opportunity. They said, okay, yeah, we're going to open the doors for you. Do 1, 2, 3. We just kind of sat and twiddled our thumbs and looked around and said, okay, let's see if we can do... Then the opportunities present themselves again, and we're just kind of like, okay, well, yeah, okay.
You know, when we look at AGOA as an example, you need to do a comparison and say, okay, so which other African countries export other than textile to the US? And then we can blame ourselves and say, no, we didn't make use. But in reality, most of the African countries only exported textile because it was easier. But anyway, we have lessons that we've learned from that AGOA. The EU is an opportunity. If we look forward and say, what can we do best? And this is initiative of the private sector. Private sector are people who want to invest, who want to go forward.
Who want to grow.
If the government is lagging, then the private sector definitely will move on their own. So it's an opportunity. It is already signed. The government bit is signed that agreement. And then leave the private sector to move.
Can private sector then work independently without government? I mean, sanction is too difficult a word, but without government involvement, where there are certain things that need to happen. There is at least, the capacity that needs to be built by government. But is it possible to work outside of that perimeter?
No, you can't say we can work without a government because this is a negotiation between two nations. So we only have the government to do their bit of signing this agreement. Then the bit of the private sector and say, now move in drones and access this market. That is our responsibility. And we are not going to sleep about it. We will take it by the horns. By the end of the day, it's business. People want to make profit. If you give me an opportunity to make profit in EU, I will go to EU without even hesitating.
Kenya Association of Manufacturers do a sterling job. There's no question about it. Because when I remember when the counties were coming into being and the efforts that the Kenya Association of Manufacturers made to try and ensure that the county governments actually understood what it is they were getting into, trying to get the executive, trying to get the politicians to understand the processes of lawmaking, these things. Kenya Association of Manufacturers has actually done a sterling job. But again, the forward movement that we speak of, without a solid commitment from government, there is a limit to how much we will move, or how quickly we'll move, or where we will actually even get to. It's not that the government isn't involved. No. The committed contribution of government, because that, in my opinion, is not there.
I've actually just been thinking, what level of commitment is this that we'd like to see from government, and why is it lacking? Again, I want to just look back into those years. So let's say the last 22 years, all right? Mwai Kibaki comes in, economy starts growing, get into 2005, referendum, the politics of the country for the next 2 years are just horrible. 2007, then again, we start picking up. And like you said, we hit a peak of over 10%, 11% contribution to GDP. Our GDP was growing. Our GDP since Kibaki left to now has continued to grow. We are at what now? 13 trillion, right? But our contribution of the manufacturing sector has gone down. That means no proper investment, new investment into this. As the economy is growing, there is no investment in tandem. But look at what the government has been doing all those times. In the Kibaki years, that's when, for example, the issue of power, they started addressing the issue of power. Split this thing, have producer, have transmission, have distribution. Let's start investing into looking at how we can expand our power mix, create GDC, go and do exploration of geothermal and how much we need, and so on and so forth. Those things didn't come into fruition until after 2013. Geothermal, we increased. We have Lake Turkana wind power. We have the solar in Garissa, and so on and so forth. So our power mix has increased. But then our cost of power is still high. Our transmission lines have increased. Ketraco has actually done many kilometers of transmission line. But our cost of power is still high. Government has a ministry dedicated to trade. Since Kibaki into Uhuru 1, into Uhuru 2, into Ruto, there is a trade ministry with a minister whose specific focus is industry. But yet, 11 to 7. What's wrong? I mean, I'm still struggling to figure out what exactly is not working. So what needs to be fixed?
So, and probably that's why we've had almost three trade and industry ministers in the last couple of years, because maybe the top level doesn't see things moving, and that's why they're making the changes. But from where we sit, key actions need to be taken to ensure that the manufacturing sector grow. Taxation, I mentioned taxation regime in this country. I mentioned predictability of the policy environment. I mentioned issues around VAT refund. For example, if you take just a simple example, KRA gets an allocation of 2.5 billion for VAT refunds. Yes, there's a claim of about 4 billion, leaving a deficit of 1.5 billion every month. of VAT refunds. And of course they say it takes time to verify some of the VAT refunds. Some of them are not correct.
Yep.
But anyway, if they automate and systemize that process to weed off the bad ones and pay the right people, then we'll have this money circulating. We've had also issue about pending bills. The government is the largest buyer in this country. When you have about 800 billion pending bills, both national and county government, just imagine that amount circulating in the economy.
Yeah.
It will be very good. The growth will be tremendous. Everybody will benefit. But right now we have people who have not been paid. You've supplied the national and the county government, but you've not been paid.
Yet all these things, Tobias, are things that, as you say them, they're obvious.
Yes.
Even those in government see them as obvious. In fact, the manufacturing sector has had its voice in government. Somebody who was in the position that you're sitting in for over 10 years at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Betty Maina, moved in to become a minister.
Yes.
And a minister for trade.
Yes.
So you can say the manufacturing sector had actually the strongest voice in government.
It started off actually as PS and moved on to
CS. The current CS in the Treasury, Dr. Chris Kiptoo, was a PS in trade. So if you talk about even at the Treasury, you have advocates who have sat with you, who have understood what you're saying, so where is the disconnect? Why is it that these obvious things become difficult?
I think
at some point?
We must admit the political environment is typically different. There are a lot of interests, even when you want to push policies.
How is that the political environment, Tobias? If you are talking about this unbridled greed that we seem to have adopted as a growth culture in this country, it isn't political. It may be politically motivated or supported, but it isn't political. It's anything that the government is involved in. When you talk about the 800 billion pending bills, those were bills which the monies were budgeted for, the projects were budgeted for, the monies were supposed to have been paid. They are pending because they were not paid, and yet the money still doesn't exist. So, do the maths. Where do you think the money went? We know that money walks on its own at midnight, but did it really leave? Did it acquire wings? Because the walking we understand. All I'm saying is there is a conversation, and that's why I talked about commitment. There is a conversation about commitment. The thing that characterized the Kibaki government was that the commitment. They said they did. The commitment brought about the change. Here, it is understood, but you don't see commitment. From the time Uhuru came in, one saw some form of commitment, but the sort of commitment that is supposed to pull us up and take us to the takeoff stage, that is not there. If it was there, with all the resources we know we have,
I think it's been there.
Where?
It's been there.
Where?
In terms of infrastructure development has continued. Those economic trade agreements that we're talking about started then.
Exactly.
Even the conversation with Trump about the future after AGOA, what then, was still in government.
The commitment.
There's all those conversations that are happening, and you're like, all right, how do we develop? How do we expand? How do we?
That's not commitment. That is understanding that these are the things you do to hoodwink the public, that you're actually doing something, and yet nothing happens. Because if it happened, you would see it.
No, but the signing of these trade agreements, that's not hoodwinking. It has happened. It has happened.
Is hoodwinking. You sign so that we have this belief that something is going to happen. If it happened, then why is it that the change we keep talking about never happens? Why?
It will take time. I was just with the EU ambassador in Machakos County, educating our members and our manufacturers and traders of the opportunity in EU. If there was no signing of this agreement, would we be sitting with the EU ambassador to talk about this?
You know, Tobias, the effort that KM makes is not what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
It is government.
It's government. The efforts that you make are clear, and the commitment is clear. I'm talking about government.
Tobias, in about 30 seconds, what must we do to realize these changes we need?
We need to be intentional, very intentional as a country, and of course committed as a country and as a people. and realize that our neighbors and our counterparts are not sleeping in the job. They're growing their manufacturing sector. They're growing their businesses. Investment in those regions is also growing. So we need to be intentional as a country and say this is where we want to go, also to grow our manufacturing sector.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very well said. Tobias Alando, Acting CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. New time.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.